I've always realized that. I'm not good at anything. I figured my wife would say okay or amen. I'm not. I'm not an expert at anything. But God has been able to use different talents that I have, what little as they may be, over the years. And I've been alive 52 years now. It amazes me at the people I've come into contact with, the things that I have been able to do, the things that I've done that I never thought I would do, the things that I wanted to do that I really never thought I would do, and then I ended up doing them. Now, one thing I've always wanted to do that I probably will never do is fly an airplane. But I got to wondering about that on our last trip that we took, because I was reading as we were getting ready to board, and I didn't tell my wife this because I was afraid she wouldn't go through the door, that there was a flight where both pilots had been incapacitated and they got on the BA system and asked if anyone knew how to fly the plane. I'd rather not learn to fly that way, but all the things that God has used in my life. And I thought, wow, I look at these guys. They've got talent. They've got those smiles that they can flash. Someday they're going to be running in, they probably, if they haven't already, run into girls that become of interest to them. Or they become of interest to girls. Let me tell you this, by the way. This is free advice. Don't let a girl chase you down. Those usually aren't the ones you want. I found that out from experience, and not on my own. I had girls chase me down, but usually it was to beat me up. That was back in grade school. But do your best to follow God. I was thinking along those lines when I thought of 1 Kings chapter 2. Now, thankfully, I'm not in the same boat that David was as I bring you this scripture and this thought this evening. But in 1 Kings chapter 2, David was about ready to die. I don't think I'm quite that bad off, although after last night, I almost feel like it. I walked into church last night and looked up, and just in time to see a guy, he's not my size, but he's about my height, headed right for me, and he tackled me and threw his arms around me. Brother Pyle, I'm so glad you're here. I haven't seen you for a whole day. I don't know if he was being serious or sarcastic, but boy, when he hit me, I felt something in my back slide that does it every once in a while, and it's been hurting me ever since, which I guess is a blessing because it's got my mind off the pain that I've been having in my right side for the last week. So that's I guess, a good thing. But I realized I'm not as young as I used to be. But David here was a lot worse off than I am. He said, the days of David drew nigh that he should die. And he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of all the earth. Be thou strong, therefore, and show thyself a man. You know, we need people. We need young men who will show themselves to be a man. Being a real man, I'm not going to preach the sermon that I could on this. I'll save it for Father's Day. But being a real man is something that's sorely missing in this world today. I mean, we've heard all about the transgenders and all that's out there. That's one thing. But being a real man, standing up, taking a stand for God, taking a stand for your family, being one who will raise the family properly, do what they need to do, and that's sadly missing today. And there's nothing I despise more than a man who is weak. I mean, in the way of, I've seen these guys. I saw one tonight when I was picking up a cake. He was standing there and talking to someone, and he was like, I just can't deal with these things sometimes. I am so stressed. If you knew the stress I was going through. He said, I feel like I'm going to get gray hair any minute now. I was like, oh, grow up. I wanted to tell him. He was probably 18, 19 years old. I wanted to say, Be a man. Things are going to get a lot worse. He was upset because they had the wrong color of icing on his cake, which they did the same thing to ours, by the way. It's not pink, but it does look like we're having a baby shower, but it'll probably still taste good. But anyway, show thyself a man. That's another sidetrack. This is what we really want to talk about. And keep the charge of the Lord thy God, to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes and his commandments, his judgments, and his testimonies. And as it is written in the law of Moses, that thou mayest prosper in all thou doest, and whithersoever thou turnest thyself, that the Lord may continue his word which he spoke concerning me, saying, if thy children take heed to their way, to walk before me in truth with all their heart, and with all their soul, there shall not fail thee, said he, a man on the throne of Israel. Following after God, taking the charge of the Lord and going forward. We're thinking about Jubal as he graduates, but this story, this charge is real for all of us this evening. Both men and women, we need to take the charge of God. Walk in his ways. The way of holiness and the way of salvation is a wonderful way. I can think of no better way to go. The world has all kinds of ideas, all kinds of directions, all kinds of things we can do. There are going to be all kinds of enticements that are thrown at these young men. You're going to have the opportunities thrown at you you can go and you can make money. You can go and you can make something of yourself. That is the world's idea today. There's nothing wrong with those things. If that's what God has told you to do, if you want to become a doctor, if you want to become an engineer, whatever those situations, if God has given you the thumbs up on that, then by all means do it, because God can use those people as well. But the world today would look at that and say, that's the only means. If you're making something of yourself, you have a good home, you have a good car, you have money, you have those things, that's what's important. But God is telling us, no, walk in my way. That's what's important. If we will follow him, we will find out that what is best comes to us. That may be money. That may be riches. There's nothing wrong with those. We get, I think, sometimes the idea in our mind, in our eyes, well, you know what, we're Christians, so we're supposed to be poor. Well, that can be our situation sometimes. You know, I'll be honest with you. I've been poor and I've been rich. And then I was poor again. Now I'm mediocre. I found out for the last 2 years I've been excited because we were above the poverty scale. We fell back below it this year because the poverty scale went up and we didn't. The poverty scale is, anyway, it's relative. I can remember the first year we went down, we moved into the apartment. I guess you could call it that. It was the basement of the church. I had taken that appointment. I had taken that without my wife ever seeing the place. I had gone down there. Now, when I look at something, I don't see it the same way she does, first of all. They took me down there and showed me, and I was looking. Bedroom number 1, bedroom number 2, bedroom number 2, 3-bedroom home. This is pretty nice. Nice big front room, kitchen, dining room. They added on a little room and made it into a dining room. That's a whole nother story I'll have to tell you sometime about using the dining room to feed the conference president. Maybe I shouldn't. She doesn't want me to tell you about the time she dumped the pot roast on the floor. Was it mashed potatoes? That's right. It wasn't something that was easily fixed. But anyway. But I looked through it and this is nice. But as I was doing that, I wasn't really looking at what is this place. I was looking at and praying, Lord, where do you want us to go? Is this what you want us to do? I preached a trial sermon that morning, preached again that evening. After I had preached that morning, we went over and I had fried squash for the first time. I don't like fried squash. It's better than no, it's not. Collard greens are better than fried squash. And if you haven't heard the collard green story, then you missed it. But after that, then they asked me if I would be their pastor. And they told me, they said, we can probably, this is always nice to hear, we can probably afford to pay you $125 a week. And if you'll come down here to be our pastor. We know that's not much, but we'll also provide the parsonage. After I lived there for a while, my wife thought when we walked in that we should be getting combat pay for living there. But anyway, we stayed there for 5-6 years. Had 2 kids. Totaled a car. Totaled another car. Went through all that time where you would look at it, and it's in some of those situations we looked at it and this is bad. I remember the first year I did my taxes after we moved down there, and I completed them, got them all finished up, and we had made, our income that year was $3,900. That was our actual income. And after I got done with that, I was like, wow, maybe we are poor. Never noticed it. Number one, I was working at Chick-fil-A, so I had Chick-fil-A almost every day of the week. If you can have Chick-fil-A every day of the week, you're doing pretty good. Go check out how much it costs. So I probably ate about as much Chick-fil-A as we made on our taxes that year, but you know what? After we left there, we've looked back on those times. Those were good people. Those were good times. We were so blessed. We were so blessed. It doesn't all about where you are. It isn't all about what you do. But it's following God. Doing what God wants you to do. Guys, Jubal, boys, folks, following God and walking in His way, keeping His statutes, doing what He would have you do, it's the best way to go. I've had people ask me. I had somebody ask me today, how, you're going to Disney again? They asked us when we were going next. I said, May. They said, weren't you just there last week? I said, yes. How do you do that? I said, we're rich. I thought we had to be. I was talking to somebody last week. They said, if you don't mind, how much do you generally, how much does a trip for yours? They sent me a message on Facebook. How much does one of your trips cost? And I told them, I said, this last one cost us, I think it was around $400 total. That's how much we put out. They said, for both of you? I said, yeah. Is that per night? No. That's about how much it cost. Well, how do you do that? Well, we have a membership that was provided for us that gets us a free place to stay a certain amount of time. COVID hit. That was shut down for a while. So we've got all these points backed up. And before you ask, we've already shared some with some people. You just didn't know us at the right time. We provided a nice vacation, 2-day vacation for an evangelist and his wife that really deserved it and had a good time. I won't say who they are because they're afraid if the wrong people find out, they won't get called to certain revivals. And I think that's pathetic, but anyway. Not on their part, but on the people's part. I said, we have that. I said, we got enough points last year and have racked up enough points. My wife flies free this year. Anytime we go anywhere on Southwest, I have enough points racked up that I've been able to book several flights. So our flights are paid for. Our rooms are paid for. We get discounts on everything down there because we have annual passes, which we got and kept and held on to through the pandemic when everyone else was getting rid of them and said, we don't want them anymore. I said, we'll hang on to them. They were adding time on, and all that banked up. God's blessed us. That's the bottom line. God has blessed us. We're able to do some things now that we had never done before. We're able to do things now. We're able to work, and we're able to do some things that we never thought we'd have opportunity to do. I can remember before I was called to preach, I had a real desire to be in radio. I found out over time that some of that came naturally. My dad was a pioneer in recording, and in a lot of things. I found out he was mechanically inclined when there weren't mechanics around. You got to remember, my father was born in 1892. He was a mortician for a while out in California. He had the first ambulance in the state of California that had water on board, to be able to have running water that had an engine. So I didn't realize all of that until I started looking back on his life and finding out some of those things. So it was only natural. And I was going to go to Purdue. I was wanting to get into radio. I was wanting to do different things. And then I got called to preach, and all of that got put on the back shelf, or so I had thought. But turned out I was at the, some people would throw me under the bus for this, but I was at the fair in Terre Haute and was walking by the country music station that was there, and I was always interested. I said, do you mind if I come in and look around? It had been years since I'd been in a radio room. I had done it when I was younger. Been in one up north of Oxford. He said, come on in, let me show you. And he started talking to me, and he's like, you want to get into radio? I said, yeah. What kind of school do you go to? He's like, don't waste your time going to school. He's like, you just got to know the right people. He said, if you don't know the right people, you'll never get into this. He said, and don't plan on doing this for a living. He said, you may not know it. This was a radio DJ that was pretty famous over there. He said, you don't know it because you got to put on a big show. He said, but this isn't my main job. He said, I do this 3 hours a day. He said, and back then, he said, I'm getting paid about $8 an hour. Well, that was pretty good. But when you're only working 3 hours a day, $24 a day, he said, that doesn't pay the rent. He said, yeah, I get paid more per hour here than I do at my other job, but my other job's what pays the bills. He said, don't get into this for money. It'll never work. But he took an interest in me. And we started talking back and forth, and he's like, Pyle. He's like, Gomer. He said, that's it, Gomer Pyle. He said, I knew that. And before long, Gomer was on the air in Terre Haute and became very popular. And so I, through some of my high school years, would play around with that and thought that's the end of it. I'm going to college now. I'm going to be a preacher. We went down to Georgia. When I got there, that one of the church members told me, he said, now we have a radio set up here. He had been involved he had set up radios for the U.S. government, radio stations down in the south, up in the north. He put them. So they had one at the church. I said, this is great. We can start doing things here. So I started doing that. By the time I was done, we had, I think, 6 satellite dishes attached to the church and an automated system we had the services going out live, and we just, don't worry, I'm not planning on doing that here. Number one, I'd break my neck trying to set the dishes up, and I don't want Chris to hurt himself. And most of you wouldn't want him hanging all over the place, but so we did all of that, and lo and behold, I got a phone call from somebody. They said, we really like your voice. Would you be interested in doing a 2-hour program once a week? I said, well, where? They said, everywhere. We've got 8 stations across the South. So I ended up reaching my goal of becoming a syndicated radio host until I found out how much time that took, and that lasted about 6 months, and I decided to retire. So I never caught up with Rush Limbaugh. I'm telling you all this to tell you this, or to say this. God gives us the desires of our heart. That was a nice little hobby, but I found out, you know what? I'm glad that wasn't what God called me to do. And I have been so happy with the life I have lived. I've been at UBC now for 22 years. I've pastored for, I can't remember how many years, in different places. I've met so many people. I was amazed as I was looking at some of the greetings I got during my sister's funeral and different people who sent me messages on Facebook and texts I got, some people that I had forgotten that I have become acquainted with over the years. I was like, wow. I've gotten to know a lot of people. I've got a lot of friends out there. What started it all? Back when I was 16, I knelt down in my chair in the school there at New Goshen in the middle of the afternoon because I had gotten to the point where I couldn't take it anymore. And I said, Lord, I want to be sanctified. What do I need to do? And it was like as clear as a bell, God told me, you've got to determine that you're going to go the way I tell you no matter what. And in that moment I said, God, I will follow your way. Just like David here said, walk in his ways. I determined that that was what I was going to do. And every step since then has been in his way. It hasn't always been easy. I could tell you about the bad times. I could tell you about the situations that we went through. I remember when we lost what we thought was going to be Scotty. We didn't know it was Scotty then. I remember going into the room that night, hundreds of miles from our parents, all by ourselves, going home after we had been told by the doctor, the baby's gone. This was the second time we'd had this happen. And I remember telling my wife, well, we've got a sweet little girl. If that's all God chooses to give us, then that's all we're supposed to have. And I remember the doctor there had said, if you want tomorrow, you probably should follow up with your obstetrician and they can make sure that everything's going okay, that there's nothing more serious happening. And I remember going in the next day and him saying, there's still a baby here. Well, we all know Scotty. He was too stubborn to give up or give in. And look at what we've got today. Yeah, that was a dark time that we went through and we didn't understand. And we still mourn that, the fact that we did lose. I don't know if we can handle two of him. Not everything's going to be roses, but the way is going to be wonderful. Wherever God calls you, whatever God wants you to do, walk in his way. No matter how young or how old you are, it's never too late to start. But we need to make that determination. I'm going to walk in his way. I'm going to do what God would have me to do. And I'm going to make heaven my home. Let's stand this evening. Now we have cake, and we have enough ice cream to feed this side of Indianapolis. So you come over and join us for a few moments over in the fellowship hall as we celebrate Jubal and his graduation. We thank you all for being here. Be inviting folks out for Sunday morning. Brother Tarter, will you dismiss us in prayer?